Hey y'all, it's me, Jen Chavez. Here in the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of volcanoes. You know, those huge ones in the Cascades, like Mount St. Helens, Mount Hood, and Mount Rainier. When I think of volcanoes, I tend to think of explosions, destruction, ash raining from the sky. I learned a lot about how devastating the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980 was when we looked back at its history on this podcast. Dozens of people died. It was terrifying. It also probably didn't help that I grew up watching volcano films of the late 1990s. I saw Dante's Peak in a second-run movie theater for $2, with Pierce Brosnan as a volcanologist trying to save the residents of a fictional small town before it's too late.
Those quakes were shallow, called damn shallow. I was up there, I felt them.
Harry, you
And
don't...
they weren't tectonic, they were magmatic. This thing is gonna blow.
Harry, I'm warning you.
And Volcano, starring Tommy Lee Jones, has an underground volcano below Los Angeles literally explode out of the La Brea tar pits.
Mitch, I don't know how to describe this, but the tar pits themselves are on fire, and they're right now spilling out onto Wilshire Boulevard. It's coming right up out of the ground itself.
But this nightmare fuel is not the whole story on volcanoes. Some of them are much less destructive. I learned, for instance, that off of Oregon's coast, there's an underwater volcano.
Axial is the most active volcano in the Northeast Pacific, which maybe some people don't know because it's hidden under the ocean.
And it has been a little grumpy.
It's actually more active than any of the volcanoes we're familiar with, like the ones on the Cascades.
That's why scientists like Bill Chadwick are headed out to sea.
Bridge, stern, all lines on deck.
Okay, we're gonna let her go.
The ship's destination for the next 2 weeks is the Axial Seamount, a highly active volcano located 300 miles off the Oregon coast.
This is kind of a natural laboratory where we can kind of practice. We can make forecasts without worrying about it's going to be a false alarm and anybody's going to care, you know?
Bill has been studying the Axial Seamount for more than 2 decades, trying to figure out how to predict volcanic eruptions.
We're moving! Woo!
From the Gert Boyle studio, this is The Evergreen, a podcast from OPB about the place you call home. Today, we're talking about the Pacific Northwest's most active undersea volcano and how scientists predict the volcano will erupt again before 2025 is over. OPB's Science and Environment reporter Jess Burns is here to break it all down. Jess, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jess, first break this down for us. Where is the Axial located, and what kind of volcano is it exactly?
All right, time for a geology lesson. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. So, Axial Seamount is an underwater volcano. So the word seamount just means mountain under the ocean, basically. It's about 300 miles off the Oregon coast. The volcano itself is a shield volcano. This is different from the volcanoes that we know in the Pacific Northwest and the Cascades. So like Mount St. Helens, Mount Hood, and Mount Rainier. Those are stratovolcanoes. And Axial is more like the volcanoes in Hawaii and in Iceland. So one of the big differences between these two is how they erupt. So stratovolcanoes are the more explosive of the two. So think back to the big blowout on Mount St. Helens. That's a stratovolcano. Shield volcanoes, the lava is a lot more soupy, it's thin, it's less viscous, and they are more likely to crack open. They kind of blow up, they crack open on the slopes, and they have the lava kind of ooze out, creating these big lava flows. And it's not like, you're 20 miles away and you're going to be hit by a huge, chunks of rock or anything like that. It's more like, watch where you're standing, the lava may come at you, and run.
Ooh, yeah.
kind of situations.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, Axial's 300 miles, pretty much due west of Astoria.
Okay, wait a second. So is this the Cascadia subduction zone that we've all heard so very much about?
It is not
Oh,
the
okay,
Cascade.
okay.
Okay. So if you are new to the Northwest,
Welcome.
the Cascade, yes, welcome, exactly. The Cascadia subduction zone is the major tectonic fault where two plates are coming together off of Oregon's coast that is the closest to the coastline. So it's still about 50 miles or so offshore. This is where the subduction zone is, where they're expecting the big one to happen. This is the kind of fault where one plate is being pushed underneath another one. So basically, the plate out in the ocean is being pushed underneath the North American plate, where we're standing right now. That's the earthquakey one. If you keep walking, if you walk offshore, you keep walking, you pass the subduction zone, you're like, hey, subduction zone, how you doing? And then you keep going for like another 250 miles. What you'll hit is the Juan de Fuca Ridge.
Okay.
Okay? The Juan de Fuca Ridge is a spot in the ocean where two tectonic plates are spreading apart, right? So they're pulling apart, and that means rock from under the earth is kind of coming to the surface there and basically creating brand new seafloor. Okay?
Okay.
That is the same seafloor that will eventually be sucked down or subducted under the Cascadia subduction zone.
Oh, yes.
All right? That said, 300 miles, far enough away. It's under a mile of ocean. The ocean's like 5,000 plus feet deep there. And because it's a shield volcano that oozes, doesn't explode, when it erupts, we won't know about it. It's not going to trigger a tsunami. It just is kind of this magical thing that's happening out in the ocean right off of our coast. And that's one of the reasons why, because it's out there and because you don't really know what's happening all the time, that's one of the reasons why the scientists go out to sea and they study it out on the boat, which is why I was out on the boat with the scientists, which is awesome. And when I was out there, I got a little inspired. I was, out at sea, feeling good sea shanty vibes.
Of course.
Yeah. And so I decided to spin a little bit of a tale for All Science No Fiction about what they were doing, but doing it in sea shanty form.
There once was a ship that set to sea, and the name of the ship was the Tommy Tommy. The winds were calm, morale was high, for research they'd undergo. Soon may the scientists come to study the seamount of Oregon. One day when the data are summed, they'll predict volcano glow.
Oh my gosh, this is art. This is high art. And for folks listening out there, these are some of your friends at OPB that are partaking in this sea shantying, right?
Yeah. 3 of the singers here are have day jobs at OPB, and I just called them out of their day to day and said, "Hey, you want to come sing with me?" It's
Which
not me
of course
singing.
everyone did.
Yes,
Why
they
wouldn't
totally
you?
did. They totally did. No, it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. And there's actually a couple more verses too. So you can go to All Science No Fiction and check it out.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So this lesson aside, there's also some big news about this. Scientists are predicting axial seamount will erupt again within a year. What more can you tell us about this latest update?
Okay, so after a bit of a snooze, Axial is waking up again. Aren't you
Good
excited?
morning, Axial.
Good morning. Axial erupted 3 times in the last 25 years or so. And when I first met volcanologist Bill Chadwick back in 2019, he had made these bold forecasts, or at least I thought it was bold forecasts, that Axial would erupt again sometime between 2020 and 2024. Well, clock's ticking on that. The thing that happened, though, is like right after he made that, the volcano was inflating pretty rapidly. It was looking like it was getting to the point where it was going to crack open. And so he made the prediction. And then right after he made the prediction, as if like the world were like, spitting on him off to the side, the volcano just was like, I'll just stop now. And it basically went kind of dormant, like nothing happened with it for years and years and years. And he was just like, what can I say? But late last year, there were some grumblings. Things started to wake up a little bit. Earthquake activity has picked up significantly. The volcano has started to inflate again, so the magma is coming in, being supplied underneath the volcano. And like that balloon, it's going to eventually pop, crack, and ooze. But, that balloon right now is the same size as when Axial erupted last time back in 2015. So we're at the same size. Bill thinks that it needs to get a little bit more larger before it does anything. But he has updated his forecast, and he has made a prediction that the volcano will erupt by the end of 2025. But realistically, it could go at any moment. Like, it could go right now, right?
Maybe happening right now.
It
we'll have
might
to find
be
out.
happening right now. It's probably not, but soon.
Okay, well, let's get to talking about all the cool scientists that you hung out with on a boat studying volcanoes. For your show, All Science, No Fiction, you got to join a group of scientists who study Axial.
Launch when ready. We are ready to go in the room.
Copy that.
And one of the people you met is Bill Chadwick. He's chief scientist on this cruise, and his job is to make sure all of the science gets done.
We're working around the clock. We don't want any downtime. We want to be go, 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 go.
So tell us about some of the tasks the team of scientists got done on this ship.
We know there was a ton of science happening there. There were probably 4 or 5 projects happening actively, and then there were just kind of a lot of scientists out there doing a little bits of science for other scientists who couldn't get out on the cruise. And so,
I see.
it was
like,
just
you're going out to the volcano. Could you check this out for me?
Yeah, exactly.
Got
Could
it.
you, pull my temperature gauge out of this hydrothermal vent for me? That'd be great. Some of the people were looking at those hydrothermal vents, kind of studying what was happening out there. There's a hydrothermal vent field out in the middle of the caldera of Axial volcano. Some people are studying the magma chamber. Some are looking at the volcano inflation. There was one project that I thought was kind of interesting out of Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, so MBARI in the science world. They were developing ways to do high-resolution mapping of the seafloor using an AUV, which is an autonomous underwater vehicle. And that vehicle is called Sentry. And, they wanted to be able to look at the changes in the surface of the volcano over time. Sentry, though, was like the most charismatic of all of the submarines. Really. It is literally a yellow submarine. Literally, and it's about 8 foot long. It's autonomous, so there's not a pilot. Basically, they lift this thing up with a big crane, they swing it over the side, they lower it down into the ocean, and then they release it. And Sentry just kind of like motors away and goes down. For this project, it was going to go down to within about, 10 meters of the ocean floor. I think actually a little bit closer even. And it was just scanning and creating these super high definition maps as it would pass over these paths. And, it was kind of just programmed. There's no one steering it or anything, but they know it's programmed to come up like 3 kilometers due west. And so the ship would then have to motor 3 miles 8 hours later, and Sentry would pop up, and then they'd pick it up, they'd put it back on board, and they'd take the data off. It was really cool.
Yeah, it sounds super cool.
Yeah, definitely.
The Axial Seamount volcano has erupted 3 times in the past 25 years. That helps scientists figure out what makes volcanoes tick. So why is this so significant for science? Jess says the volcano's accessibility from land makes it easier to study.
Axial is this really unique underwater lab, basically. In the grand scheme of the ocean, it is pretty close to shore, right? It's 22 hours of running time to get out there. So that's one thing going for it.
But the volcanic activity is another bonus because the best way to understand how something works is to watch it while it's actually working.
So the fact that there have been so many eruption cycles, each one is just invaluable for understanding how volcanoes behave.
For context, think about terrestrial volcanoes in the Pacific Northwest. Many of them are considered high threat. They're active volcanoes. But the reality is the last one with any significant eruption was Mount St. Helens in 1980.
In geologic time, that was like a minute ago.
Right.
But And, for humans who are studying it, that is more than a generation ago. And so axials erupted 3 times in that period, maybe more. They don't really know what happened before 1998. And it's looking like it'll erupt again very soon. So what an opportunity to use axial to study how volcanic systems work. And in turn, let us better understand volcanoes that pose a more immediate threat to people.
Got it. So Bill is the main character in your story. How did he get his start in the field of volcanoes?
I kind of love Bill's origin story. It feels very, very Pacific Northwest to me. We keep going back to Mount St. Helens. So he was in college studying geology in 1980 when Mount St. Helens erupted. He has memories of ash falling in Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah, and he somehow, after it erupted, found out that there was a field crew going to Mount St. Helens after the eruption to study what happened. And he talked his way onto the crew. I think he offered to go to fill in for someone who wanted to take a vacation or something like that. And so he kind of got his way on there. I just love the way he talks about this time in his life.
The big thing for me was Mount St. Helens erupted when I was in college. Before I knew it, I was getting in a helicopter and flying into the crater of Mount St. Helens. I decided then I was like an adrenaline junkie or something. I want to do more of that. That was super fun.
So that kind of extreme field experience really shaped the kind of work he really wanted to do. And as time went on, he traded this kind of high mountain extremes of the Cascades with the below wave extremes of the deep ocean. He's studied underwater volcanoes all over the world. He's traveled to the bottom of the ocean in research submarines. And, for the past 20 years or so, he's been looking at axial.
That is a very Pacific Northwest
Isn't it great?
origin story. I agree. So what does Bill's research involve these days?
Yeah, so Bill, he's at Oregon State University, and his research partner, Scott Nooner, at UNC Wilmington. They're studying what happens inside the volcano, how magma moves in the axial system. And they do this on the surface of the volcano using these instruments called bottom pressure recorders. And they're taking precise measurements of the inflation of the seafloor, that kind of balloon that I was talking about. And that's how they understand the kind of shape and the activity of the magma belowhand. And the way they do this is they have these bottom pressure recorders are basically these Pringles can, a little bit bigger than a Pringles can, but waterproof and cold proof because it's got to be near freezing temperature under however many atmospheres of pressure a mile down in the ocean. I used to know this, but I don't remember what it is right now. But suffice to say, it's a lot of pressure down there. And they put out every 2 years, they go out on the ship, they put these bottom pressure recorders at these sites. They have this submarine called Jason, not quite as charismatic as the Century, but it does have titanium arms. It's amazing.
I like that its name is Jason, too.
Yeah.
And so
Jason.
it's just Jason.
Yeah, it's Jason.
Yeah.
But they go from place to place. They collect their bottom pressure recorder. They put them in the basket on the submarine. They put out the new one. They travel along the seafloor, and they're just kind of running a mile underwater. They've got these lights on, so they're kind of illuminating their path. There's fish down there that have never seen light, literally have never seen light. So this godlike creature from above comes down and invades their space and goes by. All kinds of crazy stuff down there. They just travel around the caldera of the volcano, just placing and putting out, bringing them up, and then collecting the data to go analyze at a different time. The forecasting is kind of a side project for Bill. He's looking at that data that they're collecting, other seismic data, and just to find clues to see if it's feasible to forecast volcanic eruptions, not just here, but in other places as well. And, he's had some success. This isn't just a lark. I mean, he was wrong about the 2020 to 2024, at least he will be. But he has had success in forecasting a volcano, and by adding the seismic data to the mix, I think the chances of him being correct have gone up a little bit.
Yeah, and that's huge to be able to predict a volcanic eruption.
Yeah, even just to get within like a month. Like you don't need to know the minute it's going to erupt, but just to be like, hey, things are happening, you know? Like potentially it could save lives.
Yeah. Well, coming up after a break, more on the epic adventures of studying volcanoes. Thanks for listening to The Evergreen, our podcast from OPB about the place you call home. If you like what you hear, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, and we will keep you up to date on the latest science and so much more. You can also follow OPB on Instagram at OPB Photo, and we'll keep you posted on what Team Evergreen and all our friends at OPB are up to. And remember, this episode about the Pacific Northwest's most active undersea volcano and all the great OPB reporting you hear about on this show, including Jess Burns' great All Science No Fiction video series, is made possible by the support of many thousands of OPB members. That's the beauty of public media, my friends. Support our journalism by becoming an OPB sustaining member today at opb.org/pod. And now, back to the show. Jess, even though this was a research trip, the crew did take some time off to unwind.
It's kind of like you're going camping with a bunch of people, a floating camping.
That was Jeff Beeson, a geologist at Oregon State University. What were folks doing in their free time on the boat?
Well, there was a lot of different things going on. The main gathering space for the science crew on board was called the main lab. And it's this kind of large lab on the deck. The work on the boat continued just all the time. There was a watch system in play, and that means like your work schedule. And so people were 4 hours on, 8 hours off. And so you had this kind of disruptive schedule. It was a weird schedule to work. You would work 12 to 4 in the morning, and then you would work 12 to 4 in the afternoon. And so depending on where you were working all hours of night. So in this main lab, it was kind of the main gathering space too. And they had this kind of inauspicious big piece of plywood kind of table there. When we walked in, and everybody just had their gear on there and all the instruments on there. And very shortly thereafter, that table got cleared off, and then the ping pong net went up. They refer to as variable gravity ping pong, because you're basically playing ping pong while the ship is moving up and down. And so, you'd lunge for a ball, but you'd lunge a little further than you thought you were going to lunge because the ship kind of dropped out from underneath you a little bit. There was ping pong going on all the time, and because of that weird schedule, people were awake at all hours of night. And so I remember about halfway through the trip rolling into the galley where everybody's eating, and they just have food out at all hours. And there was like the cereal club, like the midnight cereal club. So it'd be like all these people that were getting off of watch at midnight that had worked the 8 to midnight shift that were coming out, and then they'd go and they'd all sit around together and eat a bowl of cereal before, kind of unwinding before going back to bed. And, and for me, a big activity was napping.
Yeah.
You really kind of needed it because the sleep schedules and we weren't following watch. We were following what was happening on the ship at any one given moment. So our sleep schedules were just all over the place. We were just grabbing sleep whenever we could, just to make sure we were up when we knew something was going to happen that we needed to capture on camera. And so napping was a big one as well.
One important pressing question I have out of this is, did you, Jess Burns of OPB, play ping pong on the ship yourself?
Of course I did.
Of course.
Of course I did. I made it to the second round, and then I got my butt whooped by Bill Chadwick. Not get that on camera.
Edit that out. Delete that right now. Oh, there it is, 10.
And you know what? If anyone's going to whip your butt at ping pong, it should be Bill Chadwick, because he's seriously like the nicest man on the planet. But it was one of those things, he'll beat you, but he won't beat you by so much that you feel really bad about it. He'll make you feel good about yourself while still beating you.
Oh, like almost.
Yeah,
Good job.
almost. Good job. You scored so many points against me. And then he'd play someone that was really good, and he would like beat them,
Destroy
too.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I was like, you're nice, but
We're proud of you too here at OPB's The Evergreen. Okay, now we have a little story to tell y'all. So while Jess was on the ship, something weird happened.
What are the theories going around?
We suspect sabotage, crab sabotage. Because there's obviously this battle going on between Jason and the crabs at Axial Seamount.
Well, let's back up a little. Remember Jason, the remotely operated vehicle? It's a big cube with titanium claws that can pick things up off the bottom of the ocean. Well, Jason is out cruising along the ocean floor. Scientists are controlling its arms from a control room on deck. The research team drops overboard a specialized seismometer designed to reveal things like the shape of the magma chamber under the volcano.
We gotta go straight down, straight down, straight down, straight down, straight down. Good pull.
Engineer Ted Kaczynski says the seismometer is very sensitive to vibration. It needs a car-sized plastic dome over the top of it to protect it.
The whole idea of that shield is to stop any currents from getting in and tweaking the seismometer.
Yeah.
So now it's Jason's job to pick up the dome from the seafloor with those claws and drop it down over the seismometer. But then Jess and the research team see it.
one of those crabs had climbed into the instrument, and it was just like hanging out, like right on top of it.
And that's when the crew begins Operation Crab Extraction.
The pilot of Jason said, I think we need the slurp. So the slurp is this like 4 to 6 inch diameter vacuum tube. And the guy, it was like the best line of the whole thing. The pilot like has the slurp in his hand, in his claw, and he's doing the claw, and he's like, stand by to slurp.
Stand by to slurp.
I loved it. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is amazing.
That's for you, buddy.
Yeah. Coming after you. This is your last warning.
Just by using the slurp, the crab moves, but it doesn't move all the way. That's when Kelly Chadwick, the data logger on deck, says Jason's claws come out.
They ended up grabbing it by the legs and like flying away with it. It was so funny.
Yeah. Nice.
The crab gets deposited 20 meters back and scurries away. High drama, right? Well, guess what? That's not the end of the story. As time wore on, suspicious things started happening below the waves.
We circled back to recover the seismometer. They kept it out for a couple days, and so we circled back to get it. And what they did is they kind of attached the seismometer to a float, and then they attached the hood underneath it, and then they released the weights off the float, and then the whole package just floats to the surface. We watched it. It was kind of this tediously slow but kind of fascinating process of controlling this titanium arm to do all this very delicate work. And the hood and the seismometer started floating up. We saw it float out of camera up. And an hour later, when they went to pull it in, the hood had disappeared. It was gone. It was gone. Like it left the bottom. But when it got to the surface, it was gone. And so everybody was like, could the crabs do this? Like,
that's what I'm thinking.
Is this more crabotage? You know, like, and so all this stuff. So this whole like lore around the spider crabs who were like teaming up across the axial volcano, word was getting around that if they saw us, they were supposed to come in and like
prank you.
Yeah, exactly. Some lack of a better word, fuck some shit up.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, yeah.
Yeah. So it was excellent. It was so fantastic. Like the whole episode was just this whole thing, and everybody talked. It was just like the talk of everything for days. Did you hear what happened with the crab? And word would go around, and everybody would get all excited about it and everything like that. But yeah, it was fun.
So Jess, after all the time you've spent
learning about volcanoes from scientists on this cruise, seeing demonstrations of how they study everything. What stands out as the most exciting thing to you about this story?
Personally, this was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Being able to go out on the research ship for 2 weeks, immersing myself in this whole other world, being around really smart, passionate scientists who also happen to be super kind and really fun to be around, and living in the moment all the time because you're on a 275-foot ship with 35 other people and you're in the middle of the ocean and there's nothing else you really can do, right? You're there and you are kind of forced to be there in the best possible way. I'd go again tomorrow if there was an opportunity to do it. It was seriously one of the best experiences of my life. From a science and a science storytelling perspective, there's this mystery about Axial that's really attractive. The Pacific Northwest's most active volcano is a volcano you've never heard of, right? And it's really, really active. And we know almost intimately about what's happening on a minute-by-minute basis because there is literally a cable that runs from Pacific City on the Oregon coast all the way out to the volcano and sends back information about what it's doing. We have something off of our coast that doesn't exist anywhere else, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
And to me, one of the most inspiring things, I think, about this kind of human race that we all belong to is that we're curious. And when we're curious about something, we figure out a way to go check it out. Even if it's 300 miles offshore and a mile deep under the ocean, we're like, hey, there's a volcano there and it's exploding. We should just go and spend some time out there and figure out what's happening. And this, to me, is such an incredible thing about kind of the world we live in. For everything that's going weirdly wrong right now in this world, like this curiosity is still out there, and there are people doing amazing work to, benefit us all. And, in this case, I just got lucky enough to be invited to come along.
That's a beautiful sentiment. Jess, thank you so much for being back here with us on the Evergreen and telling us about all this cool volcano stuff.
It is always a pleasure.
Jess Burns is a science reporter for OPB and producer for the Northwest show All Science, No Fiction. We'll leave a link to her video and reporting on the axial seamount in our show notes. Thanks for listening to The Evergreen, a podcast from OPB. Mia Estrada produced this episode, and our technical director is Stephen Cray. He also engineered the episode. The OPB podcast team also includes Julie Sabatier and Sage Van Wing. Jess Burns and Stephanie Gordon did the interviews you heard. The music in this episode is from Audio Network. And don't forget, if you have a question for us, you can reach out. Just send us an email at theevergreen@opb.org. I'm Jen Chavez. Catch you later.
Soon may the spider crab come to tap seismometer like a drum. Oh, one day when the science is done, he'll have undersea condo.